All right, guys. So I don't know how many of y'all drink as much whiskey as I do, but if you think you consume more than me, throw something in the chat, put your frequency on there. Not that lie that you like to give the doctor when they say how many drinks do you consume in a week, but that real number of how frequently are you touching a bourbon bottle, and maybe throw in what's your favorite bourbon. My favorite bourbon has been Still Austin for probably the last 2 years now. I became infatuated with this company around that time when my brother-in-law got me a bottle for my birthday, and since then I've been finding my way over to their distillery in South Austin, Texas to enjoy what they make in craft cocktails and bottles of bourbon. Today we're going to get to hear a lot about their journey and story and a lot of the things that makes Still unique. Along the way we're going to touch on a couple of things around cybersecurity and center technologies. Before we get started, I want to hit on a couple of items. One is really a moment of reflection. We're in Q4, it's Thanksgiving time, and I don't know how to give everybody on this call the appropriate thank you. Hopefully the whiskey does that. But thank you guys for always being in attendance, for making these a hit. Without y'all, there's no reason for us to invest time and money into doing this. 2 years ago, we had a smaller crowd join us in the backyard of Sam Hickey, the owner of Creekstone Outdoors, and we talked about the difference between smoked and fried turkeys. We did a demo doing both of those, smoked and fried, and seemed to really enjoy getting everybody prepared for Thanksgiving so they can do their own turkey in their own backyard. Just last year, we decided to turn ourselves towards barrels. A barrel of whiskey was acquired out of San Antonio, Texas. It was with Ranger Creek, and we got bottles of whiskey out to everyone who attended. At that time, we did that with Arctic Wolf Networks, that security company that's here with us again today, this time on a different topic. Back then, a year ago, we talked about the concierge team they have and how their SecOps team and concierge squad really help out with making sure that you have an end-to-end security posture and not just a product, but something tailor-fit to you. Today, we're going to get into the challenges that Q4 brings. The biggest challenge to me is remote workers. We all think we got there. We got over that hump when COVID hit. Everybody went remote at once. We put in new practices, new policies, but here we are, Q4, changes in practice, changes in employment, and vacation time everywhere, and we got to figure out how to maintain security. Well, to make things worse, Q4 is also the biggest holiday period, and we've learned through time that holidays are the heightened level of the number of cyber attacks that we're going to experience likely. So considering that this is likelihood for strike is high, and the odds of distracted employees thinking about Christmas parties or perhaps what they're going to buy for Christmas or get for Christmas, they're quicker to click on things than usual. We got to figure out how to secure the IT team more than ever. So let's hit on a couple of people that are doing this with me. Most of y'all may know me. I'm James Schuler, Director of Business Development for Center. With me as always, our producer, Taylor Littlejohn. Taylor, are you on?
I'm here.
Awesome.
Ready to go.
Thank you for being a part of it. At most of our events, guys, I'm like right by Taylor, and she's giving me like hand motions and signals. Today it's a bit different. She's a bit further away. There's a lot of outdoor noise. I can barely hear her. So if y'all have questions, as always, put them in the chat. If you got something funny to say, put it in the chat. Just chime in whenever you can, and whatever Taylor sees, she's going to bring back onto us so we can talk about it. In a minute, Jason Harry with Still Austin is going to join us. He's going to be with me up here talking about the product that Still offers. And if y'all were with me at all last quarter, y'all saw Jim Johnson already. But Jim's back with us from Arctic Wolf. Jim, come on up. Hold your applause, please. Hold your applause. Yeah, thank you. I know the studio network can't be seen by those that are like with us virtually, but those who are virtual, y'all don't know, there's about 600 people here at Still Austin watching today. Yeah, the noise is tough. I haven't been able to.
I can barely hear.
Yeah. It's 85 degrees, we're outdoors, there's no wind, luckily there's cloud cover. Jim showed up like in a suit. I had a t-shirt on at the time and I felt underdressed.
Hey,
so
dressed
Jim,
to
thanks
impress.
for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me again.
You remember Taylor?
Of course how could I
Hey,
forget
Jim.
Taylor? Come on. It's good to see you.
So Taylor was bringing up just as we got started, our last event, the William Chris Wine event, highly popular. Maybe more popular than the product was the amount of chatter that we got on the Teams chat. They kept going into some statistics, right?
Yeah.
What were you asking about that?
Well, last event we talked about businesses being more at risk than a coin flip. And I just wanted to start from there and see where it takes us.
Yeah, that was a stat that Jim brought with us
Yeah,
to the
70%.
event, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rehash that.
I mean, if you look at the last Gartner report stated that 59% of organizations were breached last year. The latest Forrester report estimates that 70% of organizations will have a security incident this year.
Boy.
That's way worse than a coin flip.
Yeah.
You couple that with the fact that the average breach in America costs $9 million. That's a major risk, and it's not just cyber risk anymore. Cyber risk is now business risk. Like a $9 million hit to an Exxon or a Halliburton, they probably weather the storm, but some of these other companies, $9 million could be catastrophic.
Yeah, and I know we're hitting punchlines, but I think last time we were together, we were actually advertising that we actually have a prospect that was in the middle of a $7 million transfer, and
Yep.
they were trying to figure out how it happened. It's wild how quick these things turn from, hey, we're too small to be a target. Maybe it's we haven't been
Everybody's
hit
a
before.
target.
Yeah, but it's like everyone now, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's not an if, it's a when, right? You look at those statistics, it's just the cyber criminals, especially with the geopolitical stuff that's going on with Israel and Hamas or Ukraine and Russia, more and more people are turning to cybercrime to frankly feed their families. So, and you couple that with the fact that AI is making it easier for the bad guys, less technically astute people to launch these attacks, it just makes that blast radius so much larger. So again, it's not if, it's when somebody's going to get breached. And we have to understand how to protect against it, but also how to minimize that impact.
So blast radius is a term you use a lot. To the layman on, maybe the business leader who's not in IT, they hear that maybe on CNN, on Fox News.
Sure.
When you talk about blast radius, what is that referring to?
That's talking about, how large of a blast radius an individual group, like a ransomware group or a hacker group, can have. So they just kind of throw out as many attacks as they can. And whoever they can get on the hook, that's when they'll start to dig in and really launch their attacks. So they'll just cast a wide net to try and get as many companies as they can.
You have a weird evolution that's happened, maybe more dramatic even than Center's marketing events, where we're now grabbing barrels of whiskey. But you've got an evolution where it used to be quite precise. There would be a target company, they'd go after that company, they get those trade secrets, they threaten to sell them. Now it's a fishnet. Whoever swims into that fishnet, they're going to find some way to exploit them, right?
Yeah, orchestration, automation, AI, ML, those are all really good things, but the bad guys use them as well, right? The threat actors will use those, again, to, like you said, cast that wide net to try and attack people, and whether that's phishing or breaking in some other way.
So stick with that idea. You've got AI on the dark side.
Yeah.
We got to have AI in our side.
100%.
Now, you have a number of businesses no different than Center. We stare at the term AI. We hear the buzzwords all the time. How do we get to take advantage of tools like that? We don't have developers making our own AI tools. Well, the easy answer is adopting products and partners that already have embedded AI tools in their solution, right?
Yeah, we have several, now it's probably 100 people on our lab teams that are doing threat research, and they're using technologies like AI and ML to build both better correlations, new detections, in order to get the data into our engineers and analysts faster. So we're using that on the good side, right? As much as the bad guys are using it, AI is a great thing, but you have to be able to use it and then couple that with human expertise that allows you to decipher the information that comes from there.
Because data is only so good.
That's right.
Yeah, right. So that's excellent. So the idea that you have a IT team in place today, and all the data in the world doesn't necessarily mean that IT guy or that IT team has the bandwidth to stare at the amount of data that's produced from an AI tool.
Or any tool, frankly.
Any tool, right? So we've learned a handful of things in the last 3 years post-COVID. One, we might have a practice in place for vulnerability scanning and patch management. That doesn't mean anyone's 100%. Two, we might think we have tools in place like antivirus. It turns out they're not looking for everything. And then three, we've probably known this longer than we think, but we've never given it real credit. We can't do it on our own. We need a team of people behind us.
100%.
Right. So if you've got I guess the perfect storm brewing that I've been talking about before you joined, Jim, and that's what Q4 challenges bring to an IT staff, you almost have to start with preventative measures like a proactive threat hunter, which is exactly what your company brings to the table, correct?
Sure, absolutely. So we focus on the entire NIST framework, right? And whether that's detect and respond with our managed detection and risk, but that's also protect and recover and prevent, where we're actually looking at the environment, trying to plug those holes before they start to leak by, like you said, looking at the patch levels on all of our externally exposed systems to make sure that we're covering those, getting those up to patch level so there aren't known vulnerabilities, and helping our customers prioritize what they need to patch first, those high impact activities that they can take sooner rather than later. Because like you said, we don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited days in the hour or unlimited people to look at the entire environment and make sure we're up to snuff or look at all the logs.
So categorically, if I were to summarize what Arctic Wolf brings to the table, there's really 4 chapters that I usually refer to.
Sure.
And 2 you just kind of hit on. And those to me are the middle 2. So the first one, strengthening the human firewall through security awareness training.
100, yep.
The second one is that MDR.
Yep.
All right. So managed detection and response. The third is vulnerability scanning management. Is that what you're
management
mentioning?
risk.
Management
what
risk.
we call it. But yeah, vulnerability management.
And then fourth is the incident response plans that we talked about some last time we were all together. And that is how do we respond when all of our offensive security strategies fail us. So if you have Center on your staff, Center as a partner is going to be remediation. It's going to be the hands-on, the details behind the intricacies. Thank you. And nuance of a business. Sorry, guys. Maybe I need more drinks.
Yeah, maybe 2.
So if you have Center on your team, they're going to be that side that's really strengthening the IT team as you've always known it. When you have Arctic Wolf with that, that's a supplement. It's assisting you with visibility that you didn't have before, with access to information you didn't have before, a security posture above and beyond, more advanced than what we're used to seeing in the foundational, fundamental level in the past. So you've got a slide that I've always loved. It shows the growth of what you cover and what you don't cover.
Sure.
I know we have that image, Taylor. Do you have that handy? Yeah, can we show that one? We call it the birthday cake slide because of its tears.
Because it looks like a birthday cake, frankly, right?
Would you just further introduce what Arctic Wolf does to the group through that, and then we're going to switch into timelines.
100%. So like if you've ever talked to Arctic Wolf, you've seen this slide probably, but it starts at the bottom where we collect data from all points of the network, right? Whether that's endpoint, whether that's security, whether that's access or whatever. And we're completely heterogeneous. So it doesn't matter if you're running Palo Alto Fortinet or Cisco for your firewalls. We work with all of them because we don't think it's fair to say, hey, we want to protect you, but you're going to have to rip out this endpoint and put in a different one.
Okay.
So we gather all that data. We place sensors at the customer's egress points so we can see everything that's coming in and out of the network.
Okay.
We place agents on the endpoints and the servers to make sure we see those processes that are running to get that full picture. So we get the full picture and we put that into our platform, and that's really where a lot of the magic happens, right? Because we have all that data in one place, we can do correlation between different tool sets and really weave a story on how the threat actors are trying to get in and do what they do. That is all delivered by our concierge delivery model. Every account gets at least 2 named individuals who are assigned to your account. So you don't call 1-800-ARCTIC-WOLF press 3 and get the next person. You got to go through everything. No, you call Bob or you call Susie, who already know your people, your processes, your environment, and they get working on problems right away. Every one of our services is delivered in that manner. And then along the top there, you have the 4 main services that we provide. Managed detection and response is where we're watching 24/7, correlating all the rules and looking for indicators of compromise. Managed risk, where again, we're looking at the patch levels, the config levels, making sure the CVEs, making sure we plug holes before they start to leak. Managed security awareness, which you touched on, which is where we're building that human firewall, which is really important at this season. We'll talk about that a little bit later, I think. And then our incident response. If the stuff really hits the fan and you need boots on the ground or hands on keyboard, that is where our incident response team comes in.
So my customers often tell me, I've got next-gen antivirus, I have EDR. Why is that not enough anymore? Why do they need something further than like an MDR?
First, let me be very clear. I think everybody needs an EDR or next-gen antivirus. Everybody needs that tool set. But there's a couple things. EDR is looking at everything from an endpoint lens. Okay. And they'll say that everybody wants to get to the endpoint. All the threat actors want to get the endpoints in the servers, and that is partially true. But the bad guys really want to get to Active Directory. They want to get to that access where, you know, that's kind of the keys to the kingdom. And we need to look at the entire environment in one place so we can correlate those different logs, those thousands of log lines in one place. So again, we can see the full picture of what the threat actors are trying to do.
Well, so you mentioned before to me that an MDR, a SIM essentially, is a log collector, and then the MDR component is the human element, the service that's really looking at that. The significance of someone looking at logs escaped me for years in the job I carry today. I kind of took it for granted or discounted it. Maybe that's because I had sales reps try to sell me out that weren't as good as us.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Naturally.
But what I think happened to me is I heard that logs come from everything, but you can see the details in it. And I thought, well, it's too much reading, and I can't read that much.
No one can.
No one can. Not a team of people, unless you have a tool assisting you with what to read and what to look at. And this is what's really opened my eyes to it, is if everything's generating a log, everything from the Microsoft stack, everything from your firewall and the hardware components in your environment, all the way to the Nest that's controlling the HVAC is generating a log. Something's got to be able to look at what's not flowing perfectly. I can't even think of a good analogy of what in my life is doing that for me. My car doesn't do that. My home doesn't do that. The closest I can think of is that my own body tells me that I'm getting sick before I'm actually carrying a fever, before I need to go to the doctor and take medication. And that's what the MDR side's doing, right?
Yeah, and that's the magic that I was talking about, where our platform does a lot of that work, where it gathers all the data, it correlates stuff, and then it bubbles it up. But you have to couple that with the human element.
Sure.
And you need the platform because, like you said, no human can sit there and read through tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of log lines and alerts a day. You need a tool set that can break that down, and then you need the human element to look at the alerts coming out of that, to run them to ground, to make sure that we're seeing those true positives of the things we really need to pay attention to, instead of the, hey, Billy logged in, 20 minutes ago. I don't really give a crap about that.
Yeah.
I care if Billy tried to log in 3 times, then he had a successful login, then he attached to box.com, then he started downloading 8 gigs of data. That's a problem. That bubbles it up, and then we need a human to look at that.
So then let's dig into an example that you brought with you on the timeline, because I hear this story, I've heard you tell it before, and then still my mind goes to the small business who's 100% cloud-based, that doesn't carry a server stack on-prem, assumes they don't have all the threat vectors that a large enterprise carries, but the reality is they're going to get you through your email anyway, they're going to get into the systems through all the common ways, and then once they're in, a timeline kicks off.
Yeah, so Taylor, do we have that timeline slide? So we pulled this up. I'll kind of walk through it at a high level. I'm not going to go through each individual point, but basically because we're gathering all the data from our sensors, our agents, all the customers' endpoints and AD and so forth. So we're gathering this data. In this timeline, our platform sees an individual account trying to log into several machines. And that by itself, not a big deal, but it's something that we need to look at. Then we see one of those machines start to launch a little PowerShell, and that's a bit of a concern. And then we see one of those accounts start to log into a C2 or command and control, known command and control server out on the internet. Immediately, because we saw all those pieces from the disparate tool sets, our platform bubbled that up. It went to our triage team. Our triage team looked at it, determined that it was PowerShell Empire, determined that, yes, they were trying to call out to command and control, and within 5 minutes, we've already detected it. And that's through the Arctic Wolf sensor, through Active Directory hooks, and it didn't even get to an endpoint or a firewall or anything, and minutes matter in an attack. And the fact that we can find that in 5 minutes, and then contain it right away, save that customer from being ransomed.
Yeah, so here's guys, the gotcha for me every time. if I had Next Gen AV and EDR, would it have caught that? The answer is actually, perhaps at some point in that story, something would have been triggered. Would it have been caught that quick, acted on that fast, personnel jumping on it at that speed? No, it wouldn't have.
The same thing can be said about business email compromise, where
Hit it.
EDR doesn't even protect there, right? Because and again, let me be clear, everybody needs EDR. But when you're talking about business email compromise, and I won't go through the mechanics of it, it's where somebody gets control of an end user's account, their email account. And they try to do fraud or impersonation or whatever. Because we're hooked in so tightly with AD, the second that somebody starts making auto forward or auto delete rules on an inbox, that immediately escalates to one of our tier 3 engineers to look at to make sure that we're protecting against them.
Well, that's one of the coolest parts to me, is that this is a program that not only assists in thwarting the ransomware attacks, but also the business email compromise attacks. We hit this analogy a quarter ago when we talked to similar folks, maybe the same folks. I like to believe it's the exact same people every time that listen.
I think there's hundreds more people on this time.
Well, I know there are here. There's 600 people here that are cheering us on. I can hear the chant. But I like to talk about that there's only 3 different things someone can do once they're in. It's either going to be a DDoS attack, which the companies we support, not very likely, a ransomware attack, which I can see that happening, or the bank fraud, which is absolutely rampant. And so if you want something that's going to wind up putting the brakes on those types of threats, and you can now risk your human firewall failing you while allowing them to work with freedom remotely, especially during the holiday season, man, it's a triple win.
And we're coming into hot fishing season, right?
Right.
So you think about the holidays, right? You know, somebody's going to get an email saying, come to our company Christmas party and click here to register.
An Evite.
Absolutely. Or Thanksgiving's coming out. We're going to do some giving online. So log in here and donate to help, give a turkey to a family in need. We're going to see all those. Equally as important, open enrollment is up right now. Every single one of us probably on the camera knows what open enrollment is. We have to sign up for our insurance. We have to put our FSA information. We have to put in all of our private information.
Yep.
And the bad guys know that. So this is prime season for the threat actors to send those phishing attacks to try and get somebody to log in.
So that's scary. So that to me is the worst one. We talked at William Chris Winery about how the processes around IT have to mature at the same rate that IT is maturing. This is a great example. If we got anyone that's HR, accounting and finance, anybody in the C-suite stack, I recommend you put an email out, a message out to employees that reminds them when open enrollment is, what the company is that's doing those emails so they know what to look for. Give them an example.
What domain they're coming from,
Bingo.
What the email is actually going to look at, who it's going to, like all the things. Like, you need to prepare your humans, right, your user stack on what to look for that is legitimate. And we also need to prepare people by saying, if you see something that just makes the hair on the back of your head stand up a little bit, call somebody. Don't send them an email. Don't reply to that email saying, is this real?
Is this real?
They'll come back and say, yes, absolutely, sign it up now. Call somebody.
Don't call the phone number on the signature.
No.
Call a number you know.
Call Mike in HR.
Look, the reality is people are going to get stumped. You can strengthen your human firewall over and over and over. The challenge is going to be when that fails, and it's going to happen, how many tools and what smart investments have we put in place to limit that breach? So blast radius was talked about earlier as what does the bad guy look at as for what can the bad guy reach. I like to look at it as how do I limit the breach to one system and not a radius of all systems in a company. And so these tools are going to help limit that. They're going to help proactively attack it. And if they're not a part today of your proactive strategy, your offensive security strategy, then you're missing something. So I'm going to kind of end on the same 4 things we talked about many events before. 1, you need confidence that you have a clean copy of data. 2, you need a proactive threat hunter, which is what we're talking about. 3, you need visibility into security gaps, which can be helped with that managed risk product through Arctic Wolf. And 4, you need to know what to happen when all else fails. Also, Arctic Wolf can help with. Center's got a lot of practice in pricing this out. I highly recommend that if you haven't ever scoped it for your business, you at least know what the budget would look like to have it. I've got a number of customers today that for as low as $30 a user a month are getting both the MDR and the vulnerability scanning component, managed risk. They're doing that because they're also part of Center's managed services offering. So when you're part of Center's managed services, we offer special discounts and programs that allow for us to take advantage of Arctic Wolf strategies at much lower rates. When you're not, that's fine. It's not part of your picture, no big deal. We can still get this story into your environment and offer our security experts as advisors throughout that process. So Taylor, I think we're gonna do a poll. That poll's gonna just chime in on if you're curious about what it would cost for a business of your size, drop your name and company name in there. Heck, if you don't want to do your company name, don't sweat it. Put your name in there, we'll find you. And before Jim leaves this afternoon, me and him are going to sit down, look at the list, and we'll pop you back with just a quick budgetary marker, and you can let us know from there what good next steps there'd be. Jim, usually we do Q&A. Should we see if there's anybody that had any questions?
I'm happy to answer any questions. They'll probably come in, and by the way, just to let the folks out there know, when I went into leadership, I got a full technical lobotomy. So I'll try to answer the questions, but shoot them at me.
He can't even spell technical.
That's hilarious.
I can spell heterogeneous though.
Yeah, nice.
Well, first off, people are loving the slides.
Oh, yeah?
I'm pretty sure they're screenshotting it because
That's all right. Those are
Let's
public
be real.
slides. I'm all for it. That's all right.
not a ton of questions though. They just seriously loving the information and making comments about it. Really good reminders. Outside of that,
Before any questions come in, if they do, great. But I want to thank you, James, for both having us here, but also being a great partner with Arctic Wolf. As you know, like Arctic Wolf, we do eyes on glass currently, right? So other than our incident response team, who actually puts hands on keyboard, for the MDR, the MR, and our managed security awareness, it's all eyes on glass. And we rely on awesome partners like you that have services. So if the customer sees something that we are either preventing or a hole that needs to be plugged, they can call you guys and come do that. And I appreciate that about you guys.
We know at Center that Arctic Wolf carries a lot of partners. We know at Center that you know that we're the best partner you have. So thank you for saying that. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks, all.
So guys, we're gonna segue now to the whiskey side of things. But you know, if y'all know me at all, that I can't be, this is my favorite part. So Jason Harry's getting his microphone right now. He's gonna be up here in a minute with me. While we do that, y'all are probably all well aware that everyone who's joining us today is gonna be getting a bottle from the Barrel Select that Chris Pace, the CEO of Center, and I got to enjoy here at the Still Austin Distillery. I'm gonna walk you through that practice, and you're gonna start to understand probably why I'm saying what I'm about to share with you. But the process of getting those bottles into our hands and from our hands into your hands is tougher than other things we've done for other events. So we don't have them readily available in our possession as we sit here. In fact, I'm sure somebody, Taylor, will probably chime in that this is a bait and switch. But the reality is I haven't even seen the bottle yet. I've seen this bottle, which we'll explain to in a minute. We're expecting the bottles in our possession within the next 2 weeks, right about Thanksgiving time. And then we're gonna start moving them out to territory to get them into your hands as fast as we can. So I got a request for you. Do me a favor, go to your inbox. There's a focused and an other.
Yep.
In the event that our marketing emails are going to other, right click on them and go down to the bottom of the menu where it says always move to focused. I'm asking you to do that because our marketing team's gonna be sending you updates on the status of that bottle of whiskey. And if you have it in other, you're likely gonna miss those, and you're probably gonna feel bait and switch. No bait and switch, I promise. This is our barrel. It's empty now, which means it's been bottled. I just not here apparently. So you're gonna get your hands on it, and we want you to know the status of that. So please go into your inbox, go to other, find an email from our marketing team, right click, move to always focused, and you should not miss any communication. Jason, you're standing off screen, but I'd love for you to come on up here. I bet you Chris, our videographer's got you intentionally off the screen there. What?
I brought you a little something just in case.
A gift? You shouldn't have. What'd you bring me?
So you've got yourself a Gold Rush. It's basically our take on a whiskey sour. It's using our Musician bourbon, which is our straight bourbon that we have, along with a little bit of sweet and sour that's handmade right here at the distillery.
What'd you bring yourself?
I brought myself a classic whiskey highball, so it's actually rye whiskey highball because I'm a cheater. So I got a rye whiskey, sparkling water, little orange swath.
Well, thank you for doing this with us. Appreciate the drink. It's too much. Thank
Pleasure's
you.
all mine. Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about what do you do for Still?
So I am what is called the brand experience and manager for Still Austin.
I want to be a brand experience.
It's a pretty sweet deal. Mainly I work alongside bourbon clubs. I manage our secret society here called the Order of Nancy, celebrating Nancy Fraley, our blender and whatnot. Then I do all of the education for internal and external for the company as well. So I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Nancy's going to be like a whole chapter in a minute of what we talk about. She's part of what I guess I'd call the secret sauce behind what makes y'all excellent. So
very much so.
We'll definitely get into that. You shared with me some details about the origins of Still that I think are too cool to leave out. So before we get into all the different Texas bourbons and things like that, can you talk a bit about Still, where it came from and how we got to this point, and then we'll get into some other fun things.
Oh yeah, that would be my pleasure. So Still Austin was conceived as early as 2014 and 2015. We were lucky enough to open our doors in 2017. We actually just celebrated our 6th anniversary last September. So we're very happy to be here. Now, when we started, it was kind of an interesting thing. Our founder, CEO, a gentleman by the name of Chris Seals, I heard you guys talking about management risk. Well, he got his start in risk management for finance.
Perfect.
So strangely enough, in an effort to get closer with his father, he and his father just weren't really great growing up. He decided to go on vacation with him through Europe. They managed to get their way to Scotland, and his father, Cleveland, who is a staple around here at the distillery, fell in love with the process of distilling and mashing and things they kind of saw over there in Scotland.
So he and his dad didn't have the greatest relationship, and he took him to Scotland.
I mean, if you drink a little bit of whiskey with somebody, you're bound to get to know them a little bit better. Got to find some common ground.
My dad and I have one of the best relationships. He's never took me to Scotland.
Oh, see, you got to start a little rocky,
All right,
I guess. That's the secret.
Continue.
But what's crazy about it is, so his father, who was a former executive at Sunkist, had just retired and was kind of like, you know what, this might be what I might want to do with the rest of my life. I could really see myself, trying to start a distillery. Chris, being in risk management, was just like, well, that is definitely not
High
what
risk.
you want to do. But he's like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, this might be a great way for me and him to kind of get to know each other, kind of navigating the water to see if this is even possible. And the way he tells the story is that was in probably late 2015, and then 2 years later, there's a 42-foot still being dropped off behind me over here, and that's the day he realized, okay, we're really going to do this.
Yeah, well, so I know that a lot of the folks that are joining us enjoy whiskey. I know that because a year ago we did a barrel at Ranger Creek. They all like to share from time to time what their favorite whiskeys are, their favorite Texas bourbons are. Taylor, in fact, just a quick reminder, if you get any interesting comments on anyone's favorite, throw them out to us. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes these distilleries different.
Oh, yeah.
Is it just the mash bill and what goes in the ingredients? Is it environmental? And then I guess get into what makes this place unique.
Well, so I'll start with the first question. What makes all the different whiskeys a little different? And this kind of goes for more than just Texas whiskey. This goes for whiskey anywhere, American whiskey, bourbon, Scotch whiskey, Japanese whiskey. It's more than just what goes into it. Whiskey is always going to be some type of grain. It's going to be corn, it's going to be rye, it's going to be barley. What really separates it is the composition of which grains you decide to put into it, where it's being made, and the method it's being made by, which we'll talk about kind of what we're doing here in just a little bit. And then just like I'm sure you guys talked about, you were with William Chris, right? I'm sure you guys talked about terroir, right? How that is very much a thing in whiskey as well. Where it is made, the environment that it's made in, the climate that it's made in, all has a massive impact on what finally comes out of that barrel at the end of the process.
Yeah, terroir was a term I didn't know yet.
Really?
Chris had to teach me that one. So
yeah, so it's that way in everything. It's kind of cool.
Now, if you've gotten to go join or go look at other distilleries, a tour is often advertised. The uniqueness of this tour is outdoors, you can see some stills, and then indoors, there's more. Tell us about the significance of these ones outdoors.
So actually, the ones outdoors we have over here behind me are actually our grain silos. So one of the things that you asked of what sets us apart here at Still Austin, well, that's one of the big things that sets us apart. We are what's called a grain to glass distillery, meaning that we manage the making of our product from the time that the farmers harvest the grain. We have a company that's here in Texas that oversees the malting. The grains are also grown in Texas, just south of Lubbock. And then we will actually mill them, malt them, mash them, distill them, barrel age them right here in Austin. So what we have over here is where we store all that grain. Our mill is in the white brick building here. And then behind us is the actual distillery where we're actually making all that stuff.
So if anyone makes a trip down to South Austin to come take a look at this, and you're going to wind up seeing that, the first thing you see as you walk up from the parking lot, or the grain the
Grain silos.
Yeah, the silos. Anyway, as you move inside, it's a totally different experience. You have something
Very different.
very unique. So I guess let's talk about who Nancy is, because I think you've named a lot of stuff here after her.
Yeah.
So talk about who Nancy is and the significance she plays.
So there are, I'm going to throw in Nancy's team with this as well. There are 3 people that really kind of help shape the identity of what we do here. First being Mike Delavante, our master distiller. Previously with Appleton Rum for almost 4 decades, he oversaw a lot of the distilling operations there and at some of their offshoot distilleries. He's the guy that designed the building behind us. We have our head distiller, John Chappell. He's the guy that oversees the day-to-day operations here at the distillery. And then we have our world-class master blender, and that's Nancy Fraley. So all 3 of them kind of work together, but Nancy Fraley is kind of the end-all, be-all of the products that you guys are going to see in bottles and whatnot, and she's the one that helps select some of these single barrels to make sure you guys have the best ones to choose from. She got her background actually working in cognac and in Armagnac in France, believe it or not.
Wow.
She's probably the most awarded whiskey blender, spirits blender in the world that no one for some reason ever heard of. She's worked with literally hundreds of distilleries worldwide, and over there in France, she's recognized as one of the best blenders in the game. In fact, she was appointed into a group called the Magnificent 12, I believe, and so it's a group of tasters that go through all of the different cognacs, Armagnacs that are made in cognac and Armagnac, and actually get to rate those chateaux. She's the first American to ever be invited onto that panel.
I haven't gotten the invite yet, so yeah, it's pretty prestigious. Now she's.
Hey, quick question. Yeah,
Kayla's
I just want to
waving me
jump
down.
in. How does Texas whiskey, as you're talking about that, how does Texas whiskey differ from what Nancy's experience is, and
Texas whiskey different from what? My apologies.
Nancy's experience, and yeah.
Oh.
So let's blend the question a little bit. Nancy got all this worldly experience, shows up inside the great state of Texas and starts messing with what we do here. Does she talk about ever what her experience was in the aha moment that this could be something?
She spends a lot of time talking about that. So our start with Nancy, so a little bit of kind of how she got into moving from France, kind of answer that question, and then kind of how she got into whiskey. So she knew that she always wanted to come back to the United States after she got her formal training and became a master blender in France. And early on, I think it's over the last 10 years, she'd worked with a lot of startups that you may be familiar with, in all honesty. So when we first kind of met Nancy back, and I guess it would have been 2015, 2016, in all honesty, she did not want to work with us. I think I can say that now. I think she'll tell me the story. She's like, there are a lot of startups, and it's really, really difficult to do things right, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. And as I mentioned before, our CEO was in risk management, so this was not his, he loved whiskey, but it's not really his, wheelbarrow, if you will.
Sure.
So what Nancy said to him when he first approached her to kind of work with us is that if you guys want to do this, you're going to need to do it 100% the right way. So she gave him this long list of different things that if we wanted to open a distillery and do it the right way, these are the things that we were going to have to nail. And we used that as our roadmap to kind of build the distillery, do the design, and get the plans. And then when we came back and asked her again, it's just like, are you sure you wouldn't want to work with us? Do you want to come down, see the property, and see what we've been working on? She'll tell the way, I love the way she tells the story, but basically she says she walked in the front door here, took a look at the distillery, and she knew, she's like, I need to be a part of this. This is going to be something very, very special.
That was all it took, huh?
Yeah, you just, take you kind of like what you guys are talking about, take the recommendations from the experts. Nancy is once again top of her field in this, and we love whiskey, but we want to do it right. We don't want to just kind of dive into the pool with not knowing how to swim, if you will. And Nancy really helped guide us on that. Mike Delavante, our master distiller, really helped us with the technical design and the still that we're going to be talking about in a moment, which bears Nancy's name and things like that. So, and then of course John, our head distiller, John Chappell, he started in New York as a distiller over there with a couple of small craft distilleries. Kind of got a little big for his britches very, very quickly, and decided he was going to try to, pack up shop and do something a little bit different.
Sure.
We ran into him literally just as he was getting ready to move, brought him back down here to Austin, and he's the one that's kind of headed up a lot of the things that we're going to be tasting today,
right?
Things you have in your barrel, yeah.
Well, I'd be remiss not to bring this up, since you mentioned the term "do it right." Every company seems to have their core values. They put them on the wall. They try to adhere by them and live by them. The first one on our list at Center Technologies is "do it right." We have a funny saying inside our office that we do it right. The times we don't, we make it right. There's a big piece of that probably sounds obvious to everybody, but for us, that's how you retain customers. That's how you build a reputation.
100%.
That's how, right. So Nancy's got this reputation. She has to do it right. So she says, we got to start still. And well, I guess she decided 42 feet was the right height to start. So there's the next thing you see when you walk in here is there's a shadow that's cast by what looks like a bell tower. And that bell tower is the home of what you're talking about,
Yep.
bears her name.
So here at Still Austin, we do something a little bit different. For any fellow whiskey nerds like myself out there, you know that spirits, no matter what they are, tequila, whiskey, rum, typically come from two different types of devices. A pot still, which is basically a giant copper pot that you heat up on the bottom and boil that alcohol off, or a column still, which is slightly more complicated. Well, most whiskey, rum, tequila, things that are going to be aged in barrels like this, those are going to be done in a pot still. Pot stills are known for maintaining a lot of the oils called esters and congeners, which give whiskey, rum, tequila, a lot of the texture and a lot of the flavor that they're known for. Here at Still Austin, we kind of wanted to try something a little bit different. And so what we did is we didn't just buy a column still, we actually had Mike Delavante, our head master distiller, design a one-of-a-kind column still. It was built in Scotland by a company called Forsyths, and took about a year in transit over the Atlantic to finally get here. It's, without getting too technical, a column still is basically just a giant tube. You pump mash in, which is your beer essentially, ground up grain that you allow to ferment for a few days. Pump it in about halfway through. As it falls down the still, you'll pump in steam from the bottom, which will shoot up and strip any alcohol and oil vapor off of that alcohol. You'll collect all that vapor at the top of the still, condense it, and that's the stuff that we're going to be putting into the barrel and drinking. What makes Nancy so interesting is not only her massive size at 42 feet, but she operates differently than other column stills. She uses a pair of condensers, similar to kind of how, I hate to say it, but kind of how, I'm sorry, lost my word there. Kind of like how a petrol, gasoline, or a diesel still works.
Sure.
You've probably seen driving through the country those giant towers, and those are stills. The same way that you refine gasoline is the same way you refine alcohol, believe it or not, just much lower temperature. That's what Nancy's able to do, and she's able to do it at the kind of efficiency that you would find at an operation like that. It's actually one of, right now at least, it's the most efficient column still on the face of the planet. It's the only one that operates in that way. It truly is a modern wonder, and we're really happy to have it.
All right, so I want to I don't know why I find this so important to double click on, but maybe short of Kevin Dunn, I don't know if Kevin's on, I don't know that any of the customers of Center or prospects I visited with have shared a love affair of bourbon like I do, where they want to go as deep as understanding that. Because I never did, but that's my new question. I'm starting to dig into and all my favorite whiskeys and bourbons and things of that nature. How is this process done? And is it less than 42 feet? So you mentioned it could be a pot based, and it could be a column based.
Yep.
So if it were column based, I know this one's unique. What is a normal height of a column based still that we might see?
So normal would be subjective. For a small operation like us, you probably wouldn't see anything over maybe 20 to 25 feet, and there's going to be a big old asterisk next to that. But if you were to go over to a large operation like the Beams or Appleton Rum, like we mentioned before, they have stills that are 50 feet. You know, typically they don't get much higher than like 50, 55 feet.
That means the column still that's here isn't necessarily what makes it unique. The height isn't necessarily what makes it unique. It's the efficiency and the way that it operates that makes it truly unique.
Exactly.
The novelty of the 42 feet is because of the size of y'all's operation.
Precisely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, do we have anyone chiming in with any flavors yet? Because we're about to talk about some differences.
We have a few flavors. One, Blanton's, obvious.
I can't believe anyone mentioned that.
It's a classic.
I didn't know anyone knew about
Can't
that.
believe it.
I will say, if you like Blanton's, you're going to want to try our cask strength bourbon. I love Blanton's myself, but that cask strength blows it out of the water.
Dang.
That's an awesome take.
Oh, go try
ahead.
that. That's a good one.
Was there another
Pappy.
Pappy's a classic.
And then Angel's Envy Ice Cider.
Oh, I haven't tried their ice cider, which is funny that
it.
someone brought up Angel's Envy, though. We don't just make bourbon here. We also make a rye whiskey and a cask strength rye.
Yeah.
The rye that we make, a lot of people, even though our rye isn't a barrel finished, meaning seeing a secondary barrel after its initial new barrel, the Angel's Envy sees a rum barrel. Ours gets a lot of people like to compare it to that. The rye that we're using is a southern growing rye, since we use everything from Texas. That's a lot softer and a lot sweeter than the typical like Kentucky, Pennsylvania rye whiskeys. And that Angel's Envy, despite being from Kentucky, because it sees a rum barrel finish, is a lot softer, a lot sweeter. So people see a lot of parallels there. So if you're a fan of the Angel's Envy rye, definitely see if you can pick up a bottle of our rye also. You might find another love affair there.
In the same spirit, is there any commonality between those geographies you mentioned? If I'm drinking any of your competitors here in Texas, yours included, are there any flavor profiles that are always going to be consistent versus a Kentucky or a Tennessee?
That's a fantastic question. I would say this. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the climate, and that'll kind of give you kind of an answer to this. So one of the biggest things that makes Texas whiskeys different from Kentucky bourbon, Pennsylvania whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, is that our climate is that much different. In places like there, you have seasons. I'm sure some of you are from places that have seasons.
Snow?
Yeah, we don't have snow. We have a couple days of ice before it's 75 degrees again 3 days later. And that's a driving force between the difference between Texas whiskey and other whiskeys from around the country. I'm sorry to get kind of technical here,
Please.
but what gives whiskey its age is not the time spent in the barrel, it's the temperature those barrels are exposed to over the course of time. If you've ever left a water bottle in the backseat of your car, it poofs up when it gets hot, shrinks when it gets cold. Same thing happens in that barrel. When it gets hot outside, and these rick houses where we age this stuff are not climate controlled, and that's on purpose so this can happen. When it gets hot, the whiskey will swell up, soak into the barrel. Sometimes it leaks out of the side a little bit, but that's okay. That's your angel's share, right? But eventually it'll get cold again, slowly begin to contract, and it'll draw itself from the inside of that oak back into the barrel, and that's how it gets those colors and flavors. Now, because here in Texas we have 9 months of summer followed by 3 months of flipping a coin every morning to figure out what the weather's going to be like, the whiskey moves much differently. It spends most of the year just leaking out of the barrel, and then spends like December through March just doing that. And that creates a lot more of those cycles, which means the whiskey gets a lot more color, a lot more flavor quicker. But just as we know, rushing isn't always the best thing. Sometimes it will leave behind some of the water-soluble wood sugars in the barrel to give it sweet caramel, vanilla, toffee notes. So the answer is a lot of Texas whiskeys will share one thing. They typically are a little bit smokier, a little bit woodier, and a lot less sweet. But that's one other thing that kind of helps us stand apart from other whiskeys here in Texas is what Nancy helps us do. It's a process called slow water reduction, or élevage. It's a trick she picked up over there while working in France. So after the whiskey reaches a certain age, around like 2.5, 3 years, we'll actually open those barrels up. We'll drop a little bit of water directly into the barrel, seal it up, and allow it to continue to age with that water content. We don't want to add enough water to proof the whiskey down or bring down that alcohol by volume. We just want to add enough to change how it interacts with the barrel and allow it to break down more of those water-soluble sugars, allowing our whiskey to be a little bit softer and sweeter than other Texas whiskeys, if that makes any sense.
Well, let's keep geeking out on the topic. We did last year a barrel of Ranger Creek. You're familiar with them in San Antonio. If anyone's still drinking that one, then they kind of failed me. They should have consumed it quicker. But if they were going to enjoy both side by side, what's one of the big differences in still that they'll taste that maybe Ranger Creek tastes different by?
Ranger Creek is kind of going to be known for, they're going to be a little bit younger than ours right now. They're really known for their kind of distilling and mashing practices. They really want you to kind of taste that mash, is from what I can understand. They want you to kind of really get the grains. For us, we want it to kind of be a little bit more integrated.
Okay.
I would say the main thing you'll notice if you were to try like their 36 caliber versus like our musician bourbon is their 36 caliber is going to be much spicier. You get a little bit more complexity, whereas ours is going to be a little bit softer. You're going to get a little more pastry notes. It's still complex, but it's going to be a lot more kind of balanced together. You're going to struggle to kind of pull those notes out, where you might have that oak or that leather kind of pop out a little bit quicker on the Ranger Creek.
If you were focused solely in the state of Texas and you were not able to find a bottle of still, what would you drink?
So my go-to, funny enough, my go-to Texas whiskey is actually a Ranger Creek. It's their 44 rye. My bourbon of choice is one that unfortunately is a little bit harder to get nowadays, but that would be the E.H. Taylor small batch bourbon. So those would probably be my non-still choices.
So definitely
A
left
lot.
Texas with me there.
I just gotta let you know.
I thought I was not supposed to be Texas. I thought that was the question. Or
Staying
just
in
not-
Texas.
Oh, staying in Texas.
Yeah, but not still.
Oh, well, staying in Texas, it would probably be Ranger Creek would be the rye. If I went for bourbon, probably Balcones Pot Still or Andalusia. If it's not bourbon, it's a single malt, the Andalusia Striker.
Very advanced. That was not expecting either one of those.
Lots of E.H. Taylor though on the chat.
Taylor's a good product.
E.H.
man.
Taylor, that's some good stuff.
If
I
it's
love
Buffalo
those.
Trace
Taylor.
Distillery, it's pretty good. Hey, for those of you guys who like Blanton's, like Taylor, but haven't ever researched how many come out of that Buffalo Trace Distillery, that's worth a glimpse. They have every major name brand you find an allocation seems to come out of there, I feel like. Let's pivot over to the barrel. Are we good on questions or anything?
But they're kind of
Hit me
random.
with one before you
I can do
convert.
one, yeah.
To send you one? Okay. Well, they're wondering how long is whiskey typically aged in barrels? Like on average, do we have an average? And then we can talk about our barrel that we bought.
There's not an average that whiskey as a whole is typically aged in barrel. It can really depending on where it is. I'm sure you guys talked about wine for your last one. So whiskey's kind of like wine. I always joke that you can make wine anywhere, right? It's just made from grapes, you ferment them. You can make sparkling wine anywhere as long as you do a secondary fermentation, add some bubbles to it. You can only make champagne in the Champagne region of France by certain rules. Whiskey is very much that same way. So like in the US, to be a straight bourbon, you have to be aged a minimum of 2 years, but as we know, bourbons are aged anywhere between 2 and 30 years here.
I find it to be a sucker's bet these days to go spend extra money on a 9-year or 12-year aged bourbon.
I think that's
Whereas
important to,
a Scotch, maybe you could do an aged Scotch that far. But what we're doing with bourbon these days, it's shorter term.
Yeah, and age is just a number, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Because like what we talked about, the whiskeys that we're going to have here in Texas often are going to be 3 to 4 years of age, but because of the climate we talked about, they're going to have seen the same amount of interaction with their barrel, pull the same amount of color and flavor as a Kentucky bourbon that's like 6 years,
Yeah.
or a Scotch whiskey that's like 8 years.
Yep.
So depending on where you're getting it, the minimum age or the maximum age you're going to want to look for can change very, very quickly. So I would say don't worry so much about age. Start looking at the back of your bottle on where it was distilled, where it was bottled, and if the person that is distilling it is the same person that is bottling it, you're going to have a pretty high level product there. Like,
Hey Jason, I just have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
I gotta know, are there bourbon sommeliers too? Or
Nancy.
whiskey?
So
Is there a
yes and
difference?
no. Actually, here in Austin, we are proud to host a group of people, for any whiskey nerds like myself, once again, called the Whiskey Tribe. They have what's called the Wizards Academy here in Austin, where they actually, you can go and for a very rigorous and not very easy course, you can earn your bourbon sommelier level, and these guys are taking it very, very seriously. They run a little distillery here in town also. So if you are interested in trying to further your bourbon knowledge, come down to Austin, I'll introduce you. Maybe you guys can get your certification.
What's it take?
Some of these guys have been doing it for years.
Years and years and years.
It's like a regular
How much money?
sommelier thing.
What can
You gotta really try.
Hey, so we're going to show this, talk about the process a minute for the barrel select. Feel free to hydrate real quick if you'd like.
Oh yeah.
Guys, this is barrel 197. Barrel 197 started, it looks like it was November of 2019. So the way I read that, just after Thanksgiving.
Actually, yeah.
2019.
11/27/2019.
And that's the barrel that we wound up selecting. The process was really fun. Christian, another member of Jason's team, brought in a number of these glasses and 5 of these, 1 for each barrel. And we took little sips of them. We had little notes. We took our notes. We discussed what we were tasting. We learned that we don't smell it like this. We open our mouth while we inhale, and learned how to do these tasting notes. Jason hasn't had our barrel yet, and so what I offered up was, let's do a live tasting real quick. Let's give you guys a sense of what you're going to expect when you get your own bottle, and just know your bottle will be a little bigger than this bottle. So Jason, here's yours.
Thank you, sir.
I'm gonna pour both of these. What do you want to share about this compared to what they might see in the store?
I mean, so the one thing I can tell you is this is going to be much, much older than like our musician bourbon. The musician bourbon that you're typically going to have is only going to be around 3 years of age, and I think now we're probably approaching like, what, 4 or 5 on that one?
Yeah.
Like, also another thing is single barrels can change drastically. Unless you see a bottle of whiskey that says single barrel on it, it was blended from multiple, sometimes tens, in some cases hundreds of different barrels. So this one is going to have a character that is completely unique, meaning the one that you guys picked, there is literally not going to be another whiskey on the face of the planet that tastes like this whiskey.
What?
Yeah, every barrel's a little different. Every tree's a little different. Every piece of oak's a little different. They impart different flavors on every different one.
No different than that, guys. It might be the same ingredients that go into every batch of securing your business, but we understand that there's details and nuance within your organization that makes you very unique as well. No two businesses are alike.
It's the truth. It is the truth.
So, give me a smell. Tell me what you're noticing.
Oh, that's delicious. I'm definitely getting lots of caramel, vanilla, a little bit of burnt brown sugar almost on the nose.
What he doesn't know, guys, is I swapped it out with Jim Beam. Kidding. Didn't happen.
There's a little bit of cinnamon and kind of this winey, kind of fruity note that I'm really, really digging on the nose there. Hopefully that transitions to the palate.
I get a ton of bourbon when I smell that right there. That's all I get.
I did a wine tasting with a girl one time. She goes, "Smells like grapes."
Smells like grapes. She sounds like a keeper.
Oh, she was great. Going for a sip?
Yeah, please. I've learned over time there's an art of taking a very, very small sip before really filling your mouth with it all.
Very much so.
Is that how you started?
Yep. Took a very tiny sip, That is spectacular. That has, so all the notes that we talked about on the nose are there. Cinnamon, burnt brown sugar, kind of like a creme brulee top, vanilla bean. But then on top of that, you get this really, really great kind of nice fruity undertone with some like dates, a little bit of, hold on, I've got to go back and figure out what that last one was.
Please, go back in there.
Yeah, like stewed dates. You get like a little bit of blackberry pie almost, some pastry crust kind of poking through in there.
Blue cheese olives. You get blue cheese olives.
I don't get blue cheese olives. No blue cheese olives,
Inside
thank
joke.
goodness.
And what I'd love for the team to hear is what I learned from Christian, who helped us with the barrel select, is keeping this very open and hardly touching it, keeping the temperature the same, wrapping it up for a while and getting heat to it, or adding just the tiniest piece of ice cube or chilled water. It changes the profile a lot. In fact, if you get your own, when you do get your own bottle, take 2 small shot glasses and do that. Try them to different temperatures. It can be subtle. And then take a sip. I thought it was 2 very different flavor profiles.
Very, very right. It's particularly with things like these single barrels at cast strength, which is what this is going to be bottled at. I mean, the same proof it was coming out of the barrel. Doing something as simple as adding just a single cube of ice, taking a sip, waiting 60 seconds, taking another sip. You'll see drastic changes every time you go back for a sip. That's why we enjoy doing this.
Well, that was maybe the most eye-opening to me. Is I definitely am not one that chugs my whiskey, but I am not one that sips it with that level of focus on detail. And I'm trying to be now. It's a totally different outlook. So I guess I'm part of the team now. I can put my hat on.
Welcome to the team, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate
Good
that.
to have you aboard.
Yeah, I'd like to join the Wizard Club. I think you ought to consider a corporate pack. We can bring all of our friends out. We can do a Wizard Club and get a Still Austin Wizard's hat.
If you guys ever want to arrange any type of event here, we love doing them, and I absolutely love coming out. We're going to be doing a lot of visits in market too, so sign up for our newsletter too. I'd love to have you guys out, and if you guys want to do anything with us, yeah, definitely.
Well, Jason, this has been a real treat. I know
Don't end.
the
We
team's
have so
looking
many
forward to
questions
this.
still.
I'm not going to answer any questions. No.
I got all those candles.
What my goal was, Taylor, was I was going to go ahead and wrap up that we're done talking about the things important to us.
Okay.
It's our turn to shift over to y'all. So if you want to hit us with the questions, just speak up, Taylor. We can barely hear you.
Yeah, I will speak up. Okay, lots of novice drinkers on.
Yeah, mix
the
it with
chat.
Coke, guys.
So we're excited to become wizards and sommeliers, but what's the difference or the biggest difference between like rye, whiskey, bourbon, scotch? Like,
Good question.
help us out. How
Yeah,
do
that's a
we?
great
Where do we
question.
start?
So if you guys are all right, I'm going to give the long answer to this, if that's
Yeah.
all right. So bourbon, once again, kind of like champagne, is a very specific type of whiskey. All bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey can be bourbon. So to be bourbon, you have to follow a very specific set of guidelines. I call it the ABCs of bourbon. A, must be made in America, so not just Kentucky, can be made anywhere in the United States. B, have to be aged in a brand new, never used, charred American white oak barrel. C, got to be made from mostly corn, at least 51%. So all bourbon is going to be primarily corn. Let's see, then there's a couple other rules. D, can't be distilled at higher than 160 proof. E, can't enter the barrel at higher than 125. And F, can't enter the bottle at less than 80 proof. So depending on how nerdy you are, you might care about those. But the most important for bourbon is G, it must be genuine. No coloring, sugar, flavoring, additives, or any additional alcohol.
You say no coloring, but the charred barrel's doing its own work.
Yeah, but I
Tell me
can't
more.
add any like red 40 in there at the end of
Okay.
it to brighten it up, if that makes any sense.
So for the novice out there, y'all should know this is what I nerd out on. There's actually only 2 businesses in America that make the charred barrel planks, and so there's 2 organizations. They just fry and char wood all day. And for all the meat events, the barbecue events, the butcher events, y'all gotta know that excites me most. If I could be the barrel provider, that'd be my dream job. Well, so that was on bourbon. Keep going into Scotch and others.
Now, so Scotch is kind of similar. So we talked about what it takes to be a bourbon. You have to be a whiskey and then all those following ABCs. Well, Scotch is the same thing. To be a Scotch, you just have to be a whiskey made in Scotland. But to be a single malt Scotch, you must be a whiskey made in Scotland from 100% malted barley, distilled twice. So you can start narrowing it down from there. And then like Irish whiskey is whiskey made in Ireland, essentially. They don't have that many rules. It must be made on a pot still, distilled twice. Canadian whiskey is the best one because they have very little rules. This is one of my favorite whiskey facts of all time. To be a Canadian rye whiskey, the law is that you must exemplify characteristics of rye. that means that you don't technically have to have any rye as long as it tastes like rye.
Yeah, I'm a rye. I exemplify those same characteristics.
Which is weird because Canada also makes some of the best rye whiskey in the world, so it's kind of this weird
weird balance. So you mentioned rye now. What you flip it back? What does a rye have to have percentage?
So you remember all those bourbon rules? For
Right.
an American rye whiskey, they're all the same, except instead of 51% corn, mostly corn, you need to be 51% rye minimum, mostly rye.
So flip from corn to rye.
Yep. And then there's wheat whiskey and oatmeal whiskey, all those same rules.
So does that
too.
mean the novice drinker can take something like this and go, oh, very corny? Or
Honestly,
if they drink a rye, they can say, well, I can taste the majority rye here.
Rye and bourbon actually do have very, very different notes. Rye is typically more herbal, more spicy. Bourbon is kind of more sweet, more subtle. So I'm probably not your first time, but if you drink a couple ryes and you drink a couple bourbons, it probably won't take you very long to be able to tell the difference between the two, in all honesty. It's much easier to do than wine.
Okay, a few more questions. One, can we shake whiskey?
Oh,
And
yeah.
how would you prefer to chill it? Like, what are we supposed to do?
I wouldn't shake an old
Over
fashioned.
ice, shaken.
So with your whiskey cocktails, you can definitely shake it, but there's a couple cocktails that stirring is the way to go. What shaking does to a cocktail is you're actually like shaking it up and mixing air in. It actually messes with how the oils and whatnot that are within your spirit. Whereas if you're stirring it, you're actually just dissolving the water without compromising those oils. So things like Old Fashions and Manhattans, stir those. Please, please, please stir those. I promise you will have a much better cocktail. But literally everything else, feel free to shake it, stir it, just pour it straight in your glass. There's not really a bad way on
You
those.
go to a bar and you order an old fashioned, and the first thing they do is start cutting up fruit, and the second thing they do is start shaking it. You
Get
pick
out
the
of
wrong
there.
drink.
Get
Just
out of
switch
there.
over to water.
So what if you add a little bit of water or do it neat? Is it just preference?
It's 100% preference.
Okay.
There's no wrong way to drink whiskey. I do some tours here every once in a while. We get that question a lot. What way do you recommend that we drink your whiskey? I say whatever way you enjoy it. A lot of people prefer stuff like these cask strength things, because they're very DIY. You can add a little bit of water, add a rock to it, mix it in with a bunch of fruit juice, and still taste the whiskey because you have that higher proof to it.
This is 118 proof, and 118 is on the higher end. I think Garrison offers like the cowboy whiskey, the once a year thing. I think it's at 133 proof. It's one of the highest I've ever seen.
Yep.
But
Balcones has a couple of
no, you're
42.
right.
Yeah, it
140.
can get crazy.
If you enjoy like Basil Hayden or some of the more common easy palate ones, those are going to be in the 90s. So all that is a water content, right?
Yep.
So if you want to add water to something strong, you're just softening up the proof. If you want to take water out of something to make it stronger, you can't. So the idea that a lot go with is that DIY comment, buy something strong and learn how much water content you like. And then most drop just a droplet or two of water at a time. I got good friends and family members, they like to add about a gallon of water per drop of whiskey. It's a different way of drinking it.
It is.
Yeah.
No, I'm guilty of doing the scotch and water, whiskey water here and now.
Sure.
But if you're trying to critically taste it and really kind of understand what you're doing, do kind of what we did, taste it neat first, maybe add 1 or 2 drops of water, go back and revisit it, maybe add a couple more and revisit it. I always say if you were to go watch Fred Minnick taste at the Ascot Awards, he's actually going to dump as much water in there, kind of like we would talk about, just dump a gallon in there to proof it down so it can be a little bit easier to drink and you can find any flaws in it. Once you get past the alcohol, you can kind of taste those flaws, and that's the idea of adding water to it.
I don't think we're going to go like for another 30 minutes or anything, but I understand there's still a couple more questions. For those of y'all who need to drop, we've met our match on time. So I'm going to do a quick closing, but if you want to stick around and hear a couple more questions be answered, I'd love it if y'all would stick around with us kind of behind the scenes. We'll chat on a couple things less formal maybe. So feel free to stick around. In the meantime, I can't thank y'all enough again for continuing to join and support our marketing initiatives and bringing something cool like Still Austin to you. I know you guys take cybersecurity seriously, but I know the things that we do around meat, around wine, around whiskey are far more entertaining at times than cybersecurity might be. So if there's something that's on your mind for how to maintain security through Q4, something you want to add to your budget for Q1, perhaps just something you want to talk about for how you currently drink whiskey and what you might want to adjust, think of me, think of us, and we'll gladly help you. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing you in our next event in Q1. So thank y'all again. Taylor, what's the next question?
Yeah, well, first off, can you just give them a reminder on what to expect and when to get the whiskey?
Yeah, so we may not have known getting into this everything we should have known when we started advertising this. You can't ship bottles of whiskey. You can, but it's illegal. and we're not there yet as an organization to ship this. So these have to be hand deliveries. Our wine we did last time, you can ship that. So we didn't have to do hand delivery. So the short answer is I'm going to have my hands on 29 cases of whiskey in the next 2 weeks. At that time, I'm going to be hand delivering those to our 5 different office sites, and they're going to start dispersing them to you at your local area or your local office. Taylor, I think we're also going to do some open hours at our offices. Is that right?
Yes.
Explain
Well, guys, we'll send out an email, and James mentioned earlier, be on the lookout for that in your other inbox or your junk. We'll get emails out this week on open house times and when to pick up your bottles. It's probably a little bit faster than waiting on an
account
AE to
executive,
drop
right?
it off.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Those of y'all who got Jamie Schombacher as your account executive, she's already told you loudly she doesn't drink. That bottle has no risk of being consumed. Those of y'all who got Andy Salazar, Andy likes to taste these whiskeys, and I'm worried those bottles won't last longer than a week. So pick what you know about your account executive on whether or not it's worth a drive, but we will be bringing these bottles to your office. Is that a good enough answer, Taylor? Is anything I'm missing?
No, that's perfect.
Okay, what other questions?
That's perfect. Okay. I got to look at my notes now. Okay. We just got to know, like, there's questions about your boots. What's happening there?
Not.
And the story
No,
behind the
Those
boots.
boots are fantastic. I was actually wondering.
And the
the same
socks,
thing.
Jason. Lots
I'm
of
way too proud of this, but
Lots
back
of
when I was
comments
a
on the
kid, probably in
socks.
high school, my dad used to go to Thailand a lot for work. And one day he came back with custom-made boots for me. These are made by a guy named Tony Leather in Bangkok. Good luck finding another pair of those. They're made of ostrich leg. If y'all know, there's only 2 legs per ostrich. So this is 1 complete ostrich worth of leg boots. So these are my favorite boots, and I wore them today for you.
Those are fantastic.
Yeah,
I've been
here to
looking at those the
impress.
whole day.
Yeah, Tony Leather, guys, if you're ever in Thailand. Thanks, Taylor. What's next?
I got to see my notes. Is there any other place we can buy still whiskey outside of here?
Heck yeah.
Yes, yeah. We
You
are
ever been to
distributed in
Specs?
30 states. If you are in, let's see, Texas, Louisiana, or Florida, no, Texas, Louisiana, or California, you should be able to find us in most of your favorite liquor stores. Same for people in the Chicago area. If you're not in one of those states, and your state is not an ABC or state controlled, go to Total Wine. We are Total Wine exclusive in 27 states and growing. So you can find us pretty much in all of those stores.
What?
If you're in our typical territories in Texas, I've never been inside of a Specs or a Total Wine or even some of the smaller liquor stores that haven't had it. And I've done my best to go to every liquor store in our territories.
Nice. So it's available.
It's
Find it.
widely.
Widely
What you're going to
available.
find,
Oh,
though,
yeah.
is what he was saying is kind of neat. The bottle we give you will taste nothing like the white label musician bottle that you see on the shelf. 1, it's a blend. 2, its proof is different. But that's not unique to still. Everything you buy, even a bottle of Jack Daniels, is a blend of multiple barrels. So the uniqueness of a barrel select is no blending. No blending. Absolutely no blending.
It's one of a kind. It literally
vegan.
is. And gluten-free.
No gluten and 100% no blending. What else? Not shaken.
Yeah. I guess maybe the last question. What type of yeast do you guys use? Like brand or?
Oh,
I know we covered it.
That's a great question, and whoever asked that knows I can't answer that. I will say this: we are one of the distilleries that has started to experiment using a what's the nice way to say this? Like a hybrid champagne yeast. It's a super active yeast. I am actually not allowed to talk about what exact strain that is because that's usually the one top
Trade
secret
secret?
thing in most distilleries. I can literally tell you everything else. You want to come out here? I'll
Yeah.
show you how I make the whiskey. That's the one thing that I'm supposed to do that with.
Cool.
that all the questions?
I think that's all the questions,
That's it?
but we do have quite a bit of people from out of state on, and I just want to address that real quickly. Guys, we didn't know this would blow up so much. We are used to having just people from Texas here, so
I'll hunt
thank
you
y'all
down.
for joining.
I will find you.
Thank y'all for joining. We will figure out a solution for y'all and either give you a Total Wine gift card or something, and y'all can go pick up some Still Austin somewhere. But unfortunately, we cannot get it to you.
I think what I'll do is I'll UPS it and just see what happens.
FedEx is the way to go.
FedEx, thank you.
There we go. We'll figure it out. Trust me.
Hey, to everybody, especially those of y'all who hung on late with us, we know that this is a big window in your busy schedule. Couldn't appreciate more you being with us. So thank y'all again for being here, and we'll see y'all in Q1. Thank
Thank
you.
you for your time.